My wife left me at my lowest, but my father's will made me a millionaire. Now she's back. My wife walked out on me right when I was in the middle of looking after my father, who was dying. The funny part is, after my dad passed and left me a millionaire in his will, she came crawling back like nothing had happened. My name is Aile's husband. I am 36 years old, and I have been married to her for 8 years. We also have 2 kids together. On top of all that, I am my father's only child, so everything related to his care fell directly on me. My dad had been dealing with kidney issues for a very long time. It was manageable at first, but over the past 2 or 3 years, things took a serious turn for the worse. He had to start going in for dialysis twice a week. At the beginning, he could handle the trips on his own, but as his health declined, he began asking me to go with him. Each week, I could see him getting weaker and weaker. After a while, I set up a fixed schedule for myself, making sure I was always the one to take him to his appointments. I never wanted him to feel like he had to face any of it by himself. He had dialysis twice a week, so I locked in Wednesdays and Saturdays for his treatments. Saturdays were not a problem since I did not work that day. And for Wednesdays, my boss gave me special permission to leave work early. In exchange, I promised to make up the lost hours by putting in extra time at night after I got home. I have been at that company for 10 years, and my boss knows me well enough to trust me. He knew I would stick to my word, so getting that arrangement approved was not difficult at all. The real problem was not my job. It was my wife, Aile. She was 34 years old, and the moment she found out I had committed to taking my dad for dialysis every week, she was not happy. She had already made it clear she did not like when I helped him out every now and then, but she never really spoke up directly. This time, she could not hold back. She came right out and said there was no point in wasting so much time on my father because no matter what I did, he was never going to appreciate me. To understand where all this tension comes from, I need to explain a little about my dad and me. My father owned a successful merchandising business and built up a decent fortune over the years. He always wanted me to step in and take over the business, but I had zero interest in that life. Technology was my passion. I was obsessed with coding, building software, and figuring out how things work behind the screen. So, when I finished school, instead of following the path my dad laid out for me, I went and got a software degree. At first, Dad tolerated it, as long as I was open to eventually working for his company. But when I graduated, I took a job at a well-known technology firm, and that was the beginning of the rift between us. Even after I got married, my dad asked me one final time if I would step into the family business. When I told him no, he lost his temper and said he would leave every penny of his fortune to charity. I told him I was fine with that. At the time, I was earning well enough. By the age of 29, I already had my own house and a decent car, all bought with my own money. I told my dad I did not need his wealth to build a good life, and I meant it. From that day on, our relationship was never quite the same. Then, 5 years ago, my mom passed away suddenly from a heart attack. That loss broke my dad completely. You have to understand, I had moved out at 17 for college, and once I started my career, I lived on my own. My mom was the only constant companion my dad had for all those years, and losing her left him completely alone. That was the turning point for me. I started visiting him more often, and I made a habit of bringing my kids along so they could spend time with him too. Eventually, my dad stepped away from his business entirely and handed it over to a trust to manage. Aile never had much of a relationship with my parents, even when my mom was alive. She made all kinds of excuses to avoid visiting them, saying my mom was too intrusive or controlling. When my dad announced I would be removed from his will, Aile's attitude toward my parents only got worse. She had no problem calling them mean, selfish, and manipulative right to my face. I told her over and over to leave my relationship with my parents alone, but she always found a way to butt in. According to her, it was not just about me. It was about how their decisions would impact our future and our children's future. I tried to reassure her that our lives and our kids' futures were secure no matter what Dad did with his money, but she refused to hear it. Now, fast forward to the present. The moment Aile found out I was going to be taking my dad to dialysis regularly, she lost it. I sat her down and explained the situation. My dad had no one else. His parents were long gone, and his older brother lived clear across the city and rarely ever checked in. Since my mom passed, my dad had been completely alone. I could not just turn my back on him, not in his condition. But no matter how I explained it, Elle refused to accept it. In fact, it only got worse. Every Saturday, she would suddenly come up with some plan. It was always something, either hosting a party, deep cleaning the house, taking the kids on a trip, or even something minor like running errands. I told her straight up she could plan whatever she wanted for Sunday, but Saturday was off limits. Still, she kept making plans and then blamed me every time I was late or had to skip her plans entirely. It became a pattern. I would rush to pick up my dad, drive him to his appointment, wait until it was done, and then rush back home, only to walk into her sarcasm and attitude. It was not just Saturdays either. Wednesday nights were just as bad. I promised my boss I would make up the hours after dialysis, but every single Wednesday, Elle would pull some stunt. She would go out to see her family, meet up with old friends, or find some random event to attend, leaving me stuck at home taking care of everything. Cooking, feeding the kids, trying to squeeze in my work, all after a long day at my job and at the dialysis center. This is just a small taste of how exhausting my life had become. My dad, being the man he was, told me more than once that he could go to dialysis with the nurse, so I did not have to stress so much. He could see how tired and anxious I was. Half the time, I barely even stopped the car when I dropped him off. I would just make sure he was inside and then race back home. Even when I picked him up, I asked him to be ready and waiting outside so I could save a few minutes. The truth is, he had a full-time nurse and a caretaker. He would have been fine, but I could not shake the guilt. I wanted to be there with him, even if it was just sitting next to him during the drive. That time we spent in the car was precious. We used to talk about old memories, silly things from my childhood. But lately, with Elle breathing down my neck, all I could focus on was driving faster and getting back to her nonsense. Even though my dad had a nurse and a caretaker with him at all times, I could not help but feel guilty for not spending enough time with him myself. The drive from his house to the dialysis clinic took about 30 minutes each way. There was a time when those drives were something I looked forward to because it gave us a chance to talk about old memories, the times when I was just a kid and life felt simple. But that changed as Elle's constant complaining got worse. Lately, the only thing on my mind during those drives was getting back home as fast as possible. Most days, I found myself speeding through traffic, cutting across lanes, and taking back roads just to shave off a few minutes. That short ride with my dad was about the only one-on-one time we had left, and I did not want to lose it or have it taken over by a hired nurse. I knew it was my duty as his son to be there, even if Ale wanted me anywhere but with him. Update 1. Things just kept going downhill after that. Elle seemed determined to do whatever it took to get me to stop helping my dad. She would bring up the same argument over and over. My father had already taken me out of his will, so spending time with him was a waste of energy. In her mind, if there was nothing to gain from it, there was no point in doing it. I could not understand how someone could see family that way. Not everything in life is about money. If a parent has nothing to leave their kids, do their children just walk away from them? Is that how it is supposed to work? After months of her whining and throwing fits, I finally snapped and asked her why she even bothered visiting her own parents since they were not leaving her anything either. That was the spark that set her off like a firecracker. She blew up, screaming that her parents had done so much more for her than my greedy father ever did for me. According to her, her parents always supported her choices, and they were nothing like my dad, who only cared about his business. She said her father would never cut her out of his life like mine did to me. Then she told me never to compare her parents to mine again. That argument was not just a one-time thing. It started happening pretty much every single Wednesday and Saturday after I got back from the clinic with my dad. The fights were getting nastier each time. At first, she would wait until we were alone to start yelling. But eventually, she stopped caring and started screaming at me in front of the kids. It got even worse when I overheard her talking bad about my dad directly to our children, trying to turn them against both of us. I stepped in to stop it, and that, of course, kicked off another fight. The constant fighting became so routine that the silence on the rare nights she did not pick a fight actually felt weird, like something was off. And sure enough, if she skipped a day, the next argument was guaranteed to be twice as bad. I got to the point where I just stopped fighting back. I would not yell, I would not defend myself. I just ignored her like she was not even there. There was nothing left to say. What was I supposed to do? Abandon my own father just to make her happy? I did not care if he had taken me out of the will. That was his right. He did it because I stood my ground and chose my own career. I was not bitter about it. That company meant everything to him, and I knew I had let him down. Honestly, I felt like I deserved it. Sometimes I wondered if all this was just karma finally coming around, punishing me for hurting my dad all those years ago. Meanwhile, my father kept getting weaker. Some days, just walking from his door to the car left him out of breath. Back when I was in a hurry, I used to ask him to meet me outside so I would not lose time. But now I just let it go. I walk inside, take his arm, and guide him carefully down every step. I do not care how long it takes anymore. I also make sure I do not speed on the way to the clinic because I know even small bumps in the road could wear him out. I would rather show up late and calm and get there fast and make him feel worse. At this point, getting home faster did not matter anymore. Whether I rushed back or not, I was always waiting to unleash some new complaint, so why should I stress myself? If I had to face her nonsense either way, I would rather spend a few more peaceful minutes with my dad. Then yesterday, she hit me with an ultimatum. She stood there and said I had to pick between her or my father. I tried one last time to explain that my dad did not have much time left. Anyone could see how weak he was. But all she did was shrug and tell me that if that was the case, I had better think long and hard about whether I wanted to stick by someone who was going to die soon or stay with her. The person who would be there forever. That was it for me. I told her flat out that if my only options were her or my father, then I was choosing my dad. There was no way I was turning my back on him to make her happy. She packed a bag and left that night. I did not try to stop her, and honestly, I was relieved to see her go. She probably thought I would chase after her or beg her to come back, but all I felt was a sense of calm, like a weight had been lifted off my chest. For the first time in years, the house felt peaceful. The day after she left, I got served with divorce papers. I figured this was where we were headed, but I did not expect it to happen that fast. Still, I was not upset. If anything, I was relieved. I signed the papers without a second thought and sent them back. What surprised me the most was that she did not even ask for custody of the kids. That was my only real worry, and she just gave them up without a fight. When she got the papers back, she called me, screaming into the phone about how I should have called her and begged her to reconsider before signing. Her mother even got on the line, yelling that a real man would have fought to save his marriage instead of just signing and sending the papers back. That was hilarious to me. She wanted the divorce, and I gave her exactly what she asked for. I told her I was happy to finally be rid of her without all the usual drama. I also made sure to remind her that she had abandoned her own kids without a second thought. She told me I could keep everything, the house, the money, even the kids. She did not want any of it. Her mother tried to defend her, saying Ale was still young and did not want the burden of raising children alone. I told her that was fine by me. I was happy to raise my kids without her. Even though her leaving was a relief, I will not pretend it is all easy. The kids miss her, especially my youngest. And with work and everything else, it is hard balancing all the responsibilities. But I will figure it out. I always do. Update 2. This one will be short. After a lot of thinking, I decided to move into my dad's house with the kids. It was the best decision I could have made. Thank you to everyone who suggested it. It worked out perfectly. Dad loved having the kids around, and they loved spending time with him. His full-time caregiver even agreed to help with the kids for a small raise. It felt like the best possible arrangement. My kids had someone watching them, and I knew they were safe right under my father's roof. Watching Dad laugh and play with my kids was the happiest I'd seen him in years. Elle never expected things to work out this well. She thought leaving me would make my life fall apart, trying to manage work, the house, the kids, and my father all by myself. Instead, it all fit together perfectly. That divorce, best thing that ever happened to me. Update 3. I have some sad news. My dad passed away last week. He went to bed happy after playing with my kids, and he just never woke up. The doctor said it was peaceful, which is all I could hope for. His nurse and caregiver both told me having me and the kids move and gave him a reason to keep going these last few months. Before that, they said he was already close to giving up. Losing him hurts, but I'm grateful he spent his last days surrounded by family. My kids are sad too, but I'm proud of the values Dad left them with. They told me how Grandpa always said life keeps moving no matter what. Hearing that from them gives me strength. Then came something I never saw coming. Dad's lawyer called me, asking me to come to his office to go over the will. I told him it was not needed. Dad had already told me everything was going to charity. I even asked if I needed to move out of his house, thinking it was part of the donation. The lawyer just laughed and told me to come in. When I got there, I saw some of the trust members already waiting. When the lawyer started reading the will, I was in shock. My dad left everything to me, the house, the business, all of it. I asked if he changed it recently, but the lawyer said the will had never been altered. I was always his heir. I broke down crying right there. All those years I thought he cut me off. Turns out he never did. He probably just wanted me to take the business seriously. The lawyer also told me my dad was actually proud that I follow my own path, even when it meant walking away from his plans. Knowing that both hurt and gave me peace at the same time. The lawyer said the business was mine to take back if I wanted. I am seriously considering it. I spent years chasing my dream, and now I think it's time to honor my dad's. After all he did for me, it is the least I can do. Later that day, I told my kids about the will. Dad even left them a small inheritance for when they turn 18. We took some flowers to his grave and sat there for a while. It was quiet and peaceful, but it hit me hard. Update 4. I guess good news travels fast. About a month after Dad passed, I officially took over his business. I also quit my job and rented out my old house. The kids and I are staying in Dad's house. They love being there, and honestly, so do I. The house is full of memories, and it just feels right. Once word got out about the inheritance, people started showing up left and right. Long-lost relatives, neighbors who never spoke to me before, even old friends popped up to say hello. But the biggest surprise? My ex-wife Ale and her parents. They walked in acting all sad, saying they would have come to the funeral if they had known. Her parents went on and on about how much they respected my dad. Ale hugged the kids, crying about how much she missed them. I asked her if she missed them so much, why did she stay away for the last 7 or 8 months? She claimed she went by our old house, found it empty, and left. I asked why she never called to check on her own kids. No answer. Her parents tried to change the subject, saying now that Dad was gone, the kids needed their mom. They even suggested we get back together for the children's sake. I laughed in their faces. My kids needed their mom when she left them. They're used to life without her now, and I'm not about to turn everything upside down to make her feel better. Once her parents left the room, Elle grabbed my hands, begging me to reconsider. She swore she loved me and missed me. I told her the truth. She does not love me. She loves the money Dad left me. I do not feel bad calling her parents greedy either, because that is exactly what they are. This is the same woman who called my dad greedy and selfish during our divorce. There was no way she was getting a dime of his money. That is when she got mad and said if I would not take her back, she would take what was rightfully hers through the courts. She never asked for anything during the divorce, but now she suddenly wants half, not just of my money, but of my dad's estate. I told her to do whatever she wanted. I would fight her all the way, but I would not give her a penny. She stormed out after throwing a few more insults. Later, I went over everything with my lawyer. He said her chances were slim to none. The divorce was final long before I inherited anything, and since I have full custody of the kids, there is not much she can do. Still, he warned me to watch her visits with the kids. If she gets in their heads, she could try for custody or demand money for child support. I took that seriously. From now on, every visit will be supervised, and I'm spending as much time with them as I can to make sure they do not feel like they need to turn to her for comfort. Running Dad's business gives me the flexibility to be there for them, and I'm planning a trip for us, somewhere sunny, maybe the Bahamas. The kids deserve a real vacation after everything we have been through. As for Ale, I have not heard from her since. I figure she is too busy running from one lawyer to another, trying to find someone willing to take her case.